Hello there everyone, welcome to another video on the channel and welcome to what I think's probably the first review of anything I've ever done on this channel since it started, and we're going to review Rennsport on PS5, the latest racing game simulator simcade that has came out for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and PC on its full release version 1.0 with crossplay on the multiplayer. And we're going to just review this from a multiplayer perspective because I think that's what this game has been advertised as. Now, Rennsport certainly has a little bit of a tarnished reputation from the way it did things when it was first revealed to the public. It kind of came out in a beta and an alpha, and only certain people were allowed to play it, esport players. It's been used for competitions. We're not going to really worry too much about that. We're going to just kind of review what I've basically had access to since I bought the game last week. We're going to take a look at the good, the hit and the miss, and the bad. But let's first off start off with some good points about this game. And that is basically that the online racing works very well, very effectively in my opinion. I'm going to run you through kind of the process that you go through to enter an online race on Rennsport. So from the opening screen you will have like a tab that says multiplayer. That's going to take you into this screen here with a calendar, a list of races and details of the race. You have to click on the calendar date and then you can use R1 and L1 to scroll through the races, and we've entered a race here at Spa-Francorchamps in the GT3s, which is due to start in around about 15 minutes. You pick your car and that is you registered for that race. Now there is a little bit of an issue at this point where there is no way to jump into a kind of connected practice session, so you will have to go back out, go into the single player menu, pick the time trial, pick your car, pick your track if you want to do some practice. Now if you're in this session here as we are, then you will get a kind of reminder with about 2 minutes to go. You can see that yellow bar at the bottom. When there's 2 minutes to go, if you're driving out on the track doing something else, that will pop up to remind you to go back in and rejoin the lobby that you have registered for. So we've jumped out a little bit early, we did a few laps there, and then you go back into the race that you've registered for and it will let you rejoin the lobby, which you will have to do to be entered into the race. It won't kind of automatically do it for you. It's not the best system in fairness, but you do get that reminder, and once you've done it a couple of times you'll be very much used to how it works. So that countdown gets to 0 and into the race we go. We've picked the BMW M4 GT3 here. We've got 45 drivers that have registered for this race, which is, you know, enough people to fill a grid. So each race is broken down into a practice, qualifying and race session. The practice is usually about 2 minutes. It's just enough for you to get out the pits and make sure your wheel is working, etc. And then qualifying lasts between about 5 to 7 minutes depending on the race and the length of the race you're doing. And races seem to vary from about 10 minutes to 15 minutes for most races, but there is longer races out there as well. I have done a couple of 30-minute races, although participation in those longer races doesn't seem to be anywhere near as populated as the kind of shorter sprint races. Something we looked at in a previous video. We obviously know that shorter, quick, easy races are certainly more popular than the longer races. So we've done our qualifying there and we have qualified in P7. Now there is a little bit of an issue with the Group 3 cars at the moment. The McLaren 720S is particularly OP, so a lot of people are choosing that car. Hopefully that is something they can get fixed. So with that done, we then hit the next go to track, make sure you move on to the next session, and we are into the race here, starting in P7. It's a grid start for this one. You get the countdown at 5 seconds, the lights start coming on, you can hit the throttle, you can false start, but you leave it in neutral, and when the lights go, you hit first gear. You can see my reactions there were of somebody who is about 95 years old. I must have been looking at something else when I was doing that, and we have lost a lot of positions into turn 1. But you can see we've got a nice grid of cars here. We're down to P12 here out of 20 drivers, so 20 drivers on the grid here for a Group 3 race around Spa-Francorchamps, and we've got 15 minutes. It's not too shabby at all, I think you will agree. So coming up through Eau Rouge there, we get overtaken by the Audi. We give the Audi a little bit of space. No point going through that corner side by side with anyone. I tried that in the previous race. It didn't work out very well for either of us. And coming down into Les Combes, We're going to have a little bit of an accident here. Somebody's going to get spun round. We're going to try and take avoided action. A little bit of a weird clunky sound when cars make contact with each other. And we'll just transfer to the end of this race, or fast forward would probably be the better way of putting it, to the end of this race. And who would know it? We finish in P7. We finish in the famous, on my channel anyway, P Wombo. Now there is a bit of a funny bit when you cross the line, the race just ends, you lose control of your car, but your car just continues trundling down the track out of control and ends up down in the barrier at La Source. And as you'll let you hear, so does every other car, which is quite amusing. So that's something they probably need to fix in order to give it just a little bit more polish, because that's not really brilliant the way the race ends there and you just hear cars crashing into each other. At the end of the race you will get a little notification of the XP that you have gained, and then the skip on to the next screen you get your all important Rennsport rating and your safety rating updated. But yeah, that's how an online race works, and I have to say, in my experience, it works very well. I've done about 20 races without any issues whatsoever. Moving on to the next thing that I think is very good about Rennsport, and that is the customization options. Now, this is probably coming from somebody who primarily plays on a console. This kind of stuff is obviously much more prevalent in kind of PC sims, and even the same PC game that's also on the console, you don't often get these options, but you have a huge amount of scope to optimise the heads up display to the way that you want it. There is a lot of information on the screen. Now it might look a little bit complicated here, but I can assure you it's very, very simple. You just kind of move the D-pad about till you get over the thing that you want, and then you'll get some options to change the way that looks. You can move it about anywhere you want on the HUD, or you can make it invisible so that it's not there at all. The HUD is very busy indeed. There is a lot of information there, so it's nice to have that option to customise it the way you want. Although, I must say, I haven't really done that much with it so far. Don't mind it the way it looks as standard. The next thing that I really like about this game, and again, it's coming from that kind of probably that console point of view, but that is the ability to edit the gameplay cameras. Now, you can edit the way the viewpoint is in terms of field of view, or the sort of seating position or positioning of the camera for each of the views in the game, of which I think there's maybe 6. I think there's 2 chase cam views, 2 cockpit cam views, there's a bonnet cam, and there is a sort of bumper cam a la Gran Turismo. But yes, having this freedom to adjust the camera is just something I've been crying out for in Gran Turismo. It really is something that should be part of every sim, and it generally is, to be fair, part of every sim with the exception of Gran Turismo. But yeah, I really like this. You can sort of set up the viewpoint to be whatever way you want. You can change the field of view depending on how far you are sitting from your screen, and indeed what size it is. Something I think is a very good point for Rennsport on PS5. But let's move on to the hit and miss elements of the game, things where I kind of think they get it almost right, not quite right, or there's an inconsistency there. And we're going to take a look at the physics, the force feedback and the sound first. Now, I'm no expert on physics in racing games, never driven a real race car, never really driven that many road cars in anger, but I have an understanding of how a car handles or should handle, or I've played a lot of sims, and the handling in Rennsport, to be honest with you, is a little bit hit and miss, hence why it's in this section. Some cars handle really nicely, some cars don't handle so nicely. So for example, the BMW M4 GT4 and the M4 GT3 handle really nicely, but something like the BMW M2 doesn't handle very nicely at all. The Porsche GTX, I think it's called, or something along those lines, I think that we're driving in this race, is a little bit weird in the handling department as well, in terms of the force feedback and just the sort of general handling. The cars are easy to drive, kind of think, you know, they're really stable, they're quite hard to spin out, or they have a lot of slip, and they're very controllable, but there is an inconsistency in the handling. But overall, you can get a lot of, it's quite an enjoyable experience to drive. You just sometimes come across that odd car that just feels a little bit light, a little bit floaty, As I said, there is just a sort of little bit of an inconsistency there in the handling between some of the cars. And as for the sound, it's generally pretty good, but there is the odd car that sounds a little bit weird. There can be the odd little sound glitch as well. So I think the physics, the force feedback and the sound deserve to be in that kind of hit and miss category. Next up in the hit and miss category is the penalty or the incident point system. So Rennsport kind of follows what a lot of other racing games do, where it gives you an allocation of instant points in the race. You can see pointed out there by the red arrow, and you generally pick these instant points up for contact with other cars, going off track, etc., those kind of things. So we make a complete arse, for want of a better word, of turn 1 in Fuji here in the BMW M2s, and we spin a other car round, go off the track, and we deservedly pick up, 4 incident points there for those indiscretions. I think we carried one over from qualifying for maybe a track incursion. So, fine. We've taken somebody out, we get some instant points. We're allowed 14 instant points before we get a drive-through penalty. So we've picked up a further one here as we go into the next little clip here. Now, I did not see that car on my inside. This was very early in my days, and I was kind of misinterpreting the radar, I think. So we get spun out, we hit the barrier, we make contact with our car, and we get hit with 8 incident points for that, which gives us a drive-through. Now, we have made contact with 2 other cars, been involved in collisions, so fine. Maybe it's not working too badly at all. However, the driver we've got tangled up with there obviously wasn't very happy with what happened and basically rams me out. And because it's a shared contact system, regardless of whether you're to blame or not, we get hit with another 6 instant points and get disqualified. So I'm going to say hit and miss for the penalty system, instant point system, because it does try to discourage contact between other cars, but getting rammed off and getting disqualified seems a little bit harsh. Maybe something they can refine. Next up in the hit and miss category, we're going to take a look at graphics and performance. Now, the reason I've kind of put this as a hit and miss is because in terms of a hit, the performance of the game is very, very good. And regardless of what track I've been on, how many cars I've had on track in front of me, we've got like a decent gaggle of Group 3 cars in front of us here. We generally have had pretty much flawless performance. It runs at 60 frames per second. I haven't seen anything that's kind of caused any kind of frame rate issues, any kind of lag issues. The netcode system seems to be pretty good as well. You can have some pretty close racing with other cars and not have to worry about any kind of weird contacts going on. So in that regard, I have to say the performance of the game is very good. But on the miss section of that, it's not a particularly good looking game. Now, it might look alright in some of the clips that you're looking at here, to be fairness. If you're maybe watching a mobile phone, it's basically getting super sampled down, so you're not really seeing the roughness of the graphics that you would if you were playing it in person. Now, I am sitting pretty close to my screen, in fairness. We're obviously on a steering wheel and pedals. Should have mentioned that. This is really just a sort of, maybe in the force feedback and handling section, we're obviously playing on a wheel, not on a pad. I've not tried it on the pad, I've no idea what it's like on the pad. But yeah, getting back to the graphics, it's not a particularly great looking game. The cockpits have got, there's a lot of detail, to be honest with you. There's quite a lot of detail, the way the trees and stuff like that, but I don't really know what's causing it to look quite so rough. Maybe the resolution's not quite there, maybe the kind of anti-aliasing that they're using to sort of smoothing off the edges is not quite doing the job, but it does have quite a rough presentation, particularly when you're sitting fairly close to the screen. But as I said, the detail is there is quite a lot of detail. It's just not presented particularly well, particularly if you're coming from something like Gran Turismo, which has like really, really good image quality. This is going to look a little bit rough in comparison, but functional is probably the best word for it. It's not hugely offensive, it just doesn't stand up to maybe something like GT7, but what does in this day and age. But in terms of performance, flawless graphics, not the best. So let's move on to the bad, and I've really only got one thing to put in the kind of bad category, and that's simply value for money. With only 19 cars and 14 tracks and not really a lot to do in the single player, there simply isn't enough game here to justify a full price release. Now, it's £50 to buy the standard version, £65 to buy the deluxe version, which doesn't really give you a great deal in terms of what you get. In addition, it just gave you access to 3 days, or access to the games 3 days earlier than the standard release. But yes, as a game, there isn't a lot here. There is a kind of general thought that Rennsport have released this game, you know, a couple of weeks prior to Project Motor Racing in order to maybe just kind of get some easy sales. There could well be something in that. It's purely speculation, but yeah, there's not a lot of game here. And yeah, had this released at maybe something like £25, honestly, I think it would been a worthy purchase, and I think it'll probably hit a price point like that pretty quickly. But yes, the value for money is not there for what you get. But in conclusion, Rennsport, I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as I've heard a lot of people try to make out. There is a reasonably competent racing game here. The online works for me anyway. I've had no issues in around about the 20 races that I've done to make this review. I do understand there was issues with Xbox players on launch, but in my experience, the online racing just worked. I got into races, there was people to race, I had good races online, there was no lag, there was no disconnects, there was no netcode issues. It just seemed to work pretty flawlessly, to be honest with you. Now, as I said, just in the prior section, there's not a great deal of content there. Had it been a £25 release, I think this would have been a pretty good game actually for £25, but the reputation that Rennsport has garnered in its first year of existence as a beta and alpha and esports exclusive, the competitions, and then maybe, I don't know, people get very caught up in the fact that you had to buy liveries, but you know, are you forced to buy them? No, that's why I've not really looked at it in this video. I just think people had made their mind up about this game before it had arrived, and I'm glad I put the money down there, gave it a shot. I'll get some value out of this, maybe not the full value for what I paid for it, but I'll get some value out of this whilst it's still going. But I think, unfortunately, very quickly, this game is going to be fairly barren and dead. Rennsport's biggest problem is it's never going to recover from that reputation, and there just is other games out there probably doing a better job. And that's pretty much the bottom line for Rennsport. Hopefully you've enjoyed this review. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Goodbye now.